having just gone through the entire series for the Queen's Gambit. I've never met you before up until this call tonight. As we talked about a little bit before, I feel like we know each other, but at the same time, we don't actually know each other. And I thought I can see a lot of at least the persona that I know of Michelle in this character. Why is that? Where are the similarities? Why would your friend have pulled that out of the Queen's Gambit of all things?
Well, I think that, it's funny because I have other girlfriends of mine who are editors, who maybe got their start a little bit later than me, but we're the same age or something. And the constant that I always get is, "Oh, Michelle, how are you're so confident in what you do and all that." And I think what I see in Beth is there's this matter of fact confidence that she has about her skills and her abilities, because she does it not because she's trying to be good at something, but it's for some other it's for a different reason. It's how she sees the world. It's how she escapes from the world, and she knows she's good at it. Obviously, on some logistical level, and I guess I'm similar to that.
I'm here today with Michelle Tesoro, member of American Cinema Editors. You are a television and a feature film editor, and some of your recent work includes Godless, On the Basis of Sex, When They See Us, and most recently, a little-known project on Netflix that got about 150 gazillion viewers, which was The Queen's Gambit. And some of your more historical work that is equally as impressive includes shows like The Newsroom, House of Cards, Luck, In Treatment, and Fringe. But there's one thing that you don't put on your About page in your resume and IMDb that, frankly, we're probably going to talk more about, which is that you applied for the ACE internship and you didn't get it. So on that note, Michelle, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Zack. I love that introduction. It just made me laugh.
I'm assuming nobody else has ever brought that up in your About page in your bio before. It's not the kind of thing you put a bunch of asterisks in and you highlight, but I think there's going to be a lot of value in talking about that a little later in today's conversation.
Yes.
So I have some really good news for you. It may be good news for the audience and it might not, but I want to make it very clear to them. You and I are not going to talk about the Queen's Gambit today. If somebody was listening and they're thinking to themselves, I really want to understand, how did she do all the split screens, or how did she pace it out? How did you make chess interesting to watch? Guess what? You've done the rounds, and there are amazing interviews about that already. And I'm even going to publicize them in the show notes. So if somebody wants to listen to some of those, two of my colleagues that I highly recommend, you did an interview with Joaquin Elizondo for Hollywood Editing Mentor, and also with Steve Hulfish for Art of the Cut. I'm going to put links to those. So if people want to dive into the craft of the Queen's Gambit and editorial, and what was it like taking notes from Scott Frank, et cetera, all amazing material. There's no reason I need to rehash it with you. We're going to go a whole lot deeper, but here's the caveat. We might not be talking about the Queen's Gambit, but boy, are we going to talk about chess. Because I believe that chess is one of the most brilliant metaphors for life. And there's a quote that I want to pull from the final episode right before the big match, and I'm not going to spoil it for the 14 people on the planet that haven't watched it yet. But there's a quote that it just popped off the page, and I said, this is what the interview is all about. And it's a quote from Thomas Huxley from way back in the 1800s. And to paraphrase, it basically says, the chessboard is the world. The pieces are the phenomena of the universe. The rules of the game are what we call the laws of nature. And the player on the other side is hidden from us. I really believe, and I teach this to all the students in my coaching and mentorship program, that if you're going to be successful, and no matter what it is no matter what you pursue, that you have to play a game of chess and not a game of checkers. And I think so many people are playing a game of checkers, trying to make the next move, trying to get the next gig, whatever it might be, because it can seem so daunting to go after the larger chess match. So that's more what I want to talk about today. It's this idea of approaching life like a game of chess, the various strategies that you've used to get where you are today, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to kind of be the general idea. Where it goes from here, I have no idea. There's probably so many good stories that we can tell. But where I want to start is we don't have to rehash your entire backstory of all the steps that you took to make it into the industry and whatnot. But what I really love to understand about creative professionals, specifically those that get to the level where you are now, what was the first spark? What was the first time that you were doing the craft and you're like, whoa, there's something to this and I want a lot more of this drug? Do you remember what the first moment is that you said, I think editing might be for me?
Well, it's interesting because I think, when I think about that moment, there's probably like 3 or 4 small moments and then maybe a fifth bigger moment where I actually realized that I could do it as a career, or that it's kind of where it was sort of solidified. So I don't know. These little moments were, so I think every little editing class that I took growing up, like there was one at Columbia College that I took they had a Columbia College high school summer program that I took, like a 60mm bullets class, and you had to shoot and cut your own thing. And it was all on like a little viewfinder moviola thing. And I was physically doing it, and I had more fun doing it, and I loved doing like little wipes and stuff. And, although I did like shooting, so I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then I think when I went to college and I had to learn, you learn the Avid and we were cutting on the Steenbeck. I think I was realizing that I was better at it than some other people, and that I don't know, I like that the time in that room a little better. And then it really solidified with me when I was learning the Avid, and the project was we all had to shoot like an artist documentary. Like we had to find like a street artist or somebody and do a portrait of them, like a 5 to 20 minute little documentary about them. And I did one on, I'm forgetting his name now, it's so long ago. I did one on the street artist, and it was so controversial. Like I put this documentary together, and I had like an interview with him, and he was a performance artist in that, he had a disability in his hips. And in New York, the way he would get around was on a skateboard. And he had, it's going to kill me that I can't remember his name. I know his name was Bill. I can't remember his last name, but he went by crutch. And he had created these crutches that had like a circular bottom to them, so that when he would get around New York, he would go really fast. And so that was kind of, you would see him around town. And then his performance art was basically he would go into a public square, whether that be Union Square or in Moscow or any other country. And because he had to use crutches to walk around because of this hip disability he had, the performance was him in various stages of either falling or disabledness, right? And so it was interesting because he would do it to you. Like when I met him the first time, we were walking together, and he kept like, flipping his skateboard and dropping it in front of me. And then I kept picking it up. And And after a while, it's like, well, why am I picking it up? Because he obviously does this all day. He doesn't need me to pick it up. And that was kind of the point of his performance art. And it was very controversial with people because they thought that was taking advantage. So you can argue with that all day long. And when I did the documentary and I interviewed him about what his performance art meant to him and all that, I put it together, and and he was really interested in how I was going to present him to other people. And I didn't realize at the time, because I was young and whatever, I was 20 years old, and I showed it, and it angered people, and some people thought it was amazing, and some people thought, and I realized why he was so interested in how I was going to put it together, because the manipulation of what we do, whether you're doing it as like a fiction or you're presenting something real, it's always going to be a point of view, and you're always making a hypothesis, a statement, and how you put those things together, you're telling a story, and you have to be careful what story you're trying to tell, right? And I think for me, that is a moment that was solidified for me, that this is where I thought this part of filmmaking was the strongest part. Because when I tried doing the other things, I didn't really enjoy the group being around a bunch of people on set.
I'm right there with you, by the way. That's one of the biggest reasons I'm in the edit room. It's being on set. Ugh, no, thank you.
No, thanks. It's a lot of waiting, hurry up and wait. And, and then like, a lot of people ask me, would you ever direct? And the answer for that for me is like, look, I love directors. I like, obviously what they do. I think it's, really important. I never want to be that person to have to try to answer all those fires. It's just, again, a part of the industry that I'm just not, I'm not strong in. And I think lucky for me, I realized that early on, and I kind of knew where my strengths were and how I can also have a creative outlet and have those two things work together, and discover that before I went into the world to try to make money, doing such a thing. So
the important discovery for you was really, I wield a lot of power in the edit room. I can really manipulate a story, the point of view. And I think a lot of times the word manipulation is taken out of context. Oh, how dare we? We don't manipulate. We just convey no, we don't. We manipulate everything.
We manipulate.
Even if it's for the best of intentions. One of the analogies that I use all the time when people want me to explain what we do for a living, I say, I play Tetris all day long with people's emotions. I move all the little blocks around and I build all these patterns in a timeline, but the movement of these blocks creates specific feelings and emotions. And ultimately, when you talk to most, if not all editors, and frankly, most creatives, the reason we ultimately do what we do is we want to convey a certain feeling and tell a certain story. Otherwise, why in the world would we spend 80 hours a week in small, dark, windowless rooms behind computers?
Right.
There are probably a lot of
scene over and over and over.
Exactly. So we're going to talk a lot more about the lifestyle that you lead as far as how it is on a TV series versus a feature, and especially if you're working on a TV series where you're the only editor, which is a very unique situation. That's one that even I haven't been in my entire career. But what I want to talk a little bit more are the themes that I see inherent in some of the different things you work on. Because one of the things that I talk about a lot with my students is that if you're really going to devise a chess strategy, one of your first moves is you have to identify what are my creative needs and my passions. And you found that you really love the process of manipulating story and picking a specific point of view. But with this documentary that you mentioned, and with the Queen's Gambit, and with On the Basis of Sex specifically, and we could dive into other ones, but what I'm already seeing is this pattern of this underdog unknown that nobody really pays attention to, that rises up from the ground and really teaches the world something. Would you say that I'm on to something there?
Oh, Zack. It's funny. You are onto something. It's funny that you say that, because when we had our friends and family, well, it wasn't a screening because we couldn't do it in person. We had to do it all on Pix. I invited a good friend of mine who assisted me for like 4 or 5 shows, who's now an editor now, Lisa DeMarias, to be one of the viewers. And she watched it and she said, like, I was thinking that you must really connect with this character, Michelle. She knows me so well. And yeah, it's yes.
So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. Having just gone through the entire series for the Queen's Gambit, I've never met you before up until this call tonight. As we talked about a little bit before, I feel like we know each other. but at the same time, we don't actually know each other. And I thought I can see a lot of at least the persona that I know of Michelle in this character. Why is that? Where are the similarities? Why would your friend have pulled that out of the Queen's Gambit of all things?
Well, I think that, it's funny because I have other girlfriends of mine who are editors, who maybe got their start a little bit later than me, but we're the same age or something. And the constant that I always get is, "Oh, Michelle, how are you're so confident in what you do and all that." And I think what I see in Beth is there's this matter of fact confidence that she has about her skills and her abilities, because she does it not because she's trying to be good at something, but it's for some other it's for a different reason. It's how she sees the world. It's how she escapes from the world. And she knows she's good at it. Obviously, it's on some logistical level. And I guess I'm similar to that. It's like I don't want to say, "Hey, I'm great at this," because there's always, as you go through your career and you realize, oh, I don't know how to do that, or I didn't realize I could solve that problem this way, or whatever. But my personality, I just kind of like go for what I want, and I don't really care if people like me or don't like me. And so I'm willing to go out there and like piss somebody off or offend somebody, or I'm not worried about someone rejecting me because, oh, well, get in line, but, and so I think it's like, at least I asked. So I know I'll go over there and ask this person or something. So I think she kind of embodies that personality a little bit. And also, I mean, there's the general thing when I started, there's a lot of men, in our industry. And, I'm used to being like one of few women. And I'm actually very comfortable in that situation. I'm not saying that that's great or anything like that, but I never let that bother me so much unless somebody had pointed it out, but it never intrinsically bothered me. So, and I feel like she's that way too, and then I also think that there's just some awkwardness, and this is very personal, but of how she relates to men and how she relates to intimate relationships in general. Like, I had a working mother, single mother, and, I have two older siblings, but they're really a lot older, like 10 and 14 years older than me. So I was alone a lot, lived in my head a lot. And as you know, now that I'm saying it, it's like, that's the same. She's like always by herself, always in her head. And it's always like imagining. So it's difficult when, you see a lot of these characters in the show, are trying to get close to her, and she has no idea what to do with it, how to relate to them. I mean, geez, poor Harry Beltic, and I feel like I've been in those situations sometimes. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
And I was going to say, a lot of those character traits sound somewhat similar to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, on the basis of sex. There's some other similarities there, no?
Yeah, I guess so. It's funny. I loved working on a movie, obviously, because you're telling a story about this icon, who's really done so much for me as a woman, the world, overall, for both men and women. That's what's so great about that story, is like, it's not just she did something for a woman, she did something for a man in terms of equality for both sexes, and I mean, that's amazing. And yeah, again, awkward, but like living a life that for her time, she was kind of pushing against the grain. I mean, she really reminds me a lot about, how my mother lived. My mom's really smart. She could never be kind of pinned down. And she lived, for all intents and purposes, sort of an unconventional life. by being single for most of her life and just working and really good at her job. And yes, the justice, you know, the life that we were presenting in the movie anyway, you know, as I learned more about her, it, you know, it's very similar. It's just like she just had a thing that she needed to do. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if it's luck, but, you know, she was lucky to have people around her who supported her. Because really, when you think about it, at the time, she could have been with anybody who would have tried to squash those dreams. But, you know, Marty and his family really, really supported her. And she also had a very strong mother figure who wanted to push her in that direction. So, yeah, yes, it's true. It's very similar. And I remember my husband now, my fiance then, you know, he was taking some time off. He's also in the business. He was with me seeing this movie come together. And actually, when we screened the movie for the Justice in DC, he happened to be there working on Wonder Woman. So he was allowed to come to the screening because, you know, it was you had to give the list, and the Justice invited her family and all of her clerks. And we went to see it, and she was so like this amazing woman who's like 4'11", you know, very soft spoken. It was probably like the highlight of my career is like meeting Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and hoping I wasn't going to say something stupid, you know. And I remember after coming home from that, like all of a sudden, and after seeing the movie, he was like, well, yeah, maybe, honey, maybe I'll stay home. And, you know, and like he was so affected by how like Marty Ginsburg was and like how amazing she was. I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't want you to stop what you love. But, you know, it was, yeah, very, very strong women, I guess. Interesting personalities. What was the other movie that you mentioned? So you said On the Basis.
Well, it was the documentary film that you talked about. That was your spark of inspiration, because there's another person that was kind of coming out of the ether from nowhere, having this impact on people because this is who I am. This is the performance art. This is the lesson I'm going to teach. And I love this image of him just constantly dropping the skateboard, thinking to himself, you realize I can do this myself. Why? It caused you to think differently about the way you perceive somebody with a disability. Right. Exactly. Right. In certain contexts, whether it's chess or whether it's law, being a female was a disability. Sure. Right. So, it's eerie to me how similar you and I are, because this whole thing of like, I just see it and I go for it. Like, oh my God, that's my MO, sometimes to my detriment. It can be a superpower. It can be a kryptonite. Same thing for me. Like a little over 3 years ago, overweight, out of shape, felt like crap. I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to be an American Ninja Warrior. That sounds like fun. Just said I'm going to do it. There's no reason that it made any sense whatsoever. But once I set my mind to it, I had the confidence that I could figure it out and make it happen. And I think that's what you're pointing out in these characters that's so similar to you, is that there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I think that was a line that Beth found over the course of the series. But as little as age 9 and 10, you could just tell she already knew, I'm the best at this. Right. Maybe I can't beat the best yet, but I know I'm the best in the world at this one thing. And there's a part of you that I also sense that you just know I'm really, really good at what I do. And there are still a lot of things to learn, a lot of different techniques, different stories that I can tell. There are always going to be new challenges and problems to solve. But you just exude the idea that I go in the room, I can solve your problems, and I know I'm good at what I do. Yes, it's hard for me to say that about myself, but I know that about myself, and I know other people who know me would say that is absolutely so
true.
Basically, within the first 15 minutes of our psychoanalysis session, we now better understand your childhood and your really deeper inner workings for why you're doing what you're doing. Like I said, this is going to be a little bit off the beaten path for our usual interviews.
I love it.
I really wanted to understand what makes you tick. Because to get where you are at your age with all of the various quote unquote disabilities, it's pretty difficult to get to the stage of your career where you are now. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is I've had multiple people in my program where when I teach them how to do outreach and connect with people that they want to learn from, as you know now, more than one have said, the number one person on my list that I really want to talk to is Michelle Tesoro, because she inspires me to believe that as a woman, and I even had a Filipino woman that said, I can actually do this. I never actually saw myself doing this, but now that I see somebody else that's successful, I have no excuse and I know that I can do it. And there was a quote that you brought up about this idea of being a woman specifically in the world of editing, and I want you to expand on this a little bit. It was a brilliant quote. You said, we are all the same height when we sit in the chair. It's all about your mind and your solving strategy, your ability to solve problems. So I love everything about that except for the visual of sitting in a chair, because of course I prefer you're standing and moving, but we won't get into that quite yet. But talk to me a little bit more about this equalizer of being a woman versus a man once you're in the editing chair.
I mean, I think no matter what your instrument is, it's, you have to do the job through an instrument, whatever that's going to be, right? It was film, and now it's, not NLEs, and now we're, at a computer and you're doing it. And it seems to me, no matter what the technology, you're basically performing the same job. It's you're talking with another person or maybe a group of people, and you're trying to solve a problem together by putting picture together. And no matter, it doesn't, and that has to come from internal and your brain and how you communicate that, if you're 6'4" or if you're 5'1", right? So I think because, a lot of people view, editors view editing as more of an intellectual sport, I believe that is the great that's the equalizer, right? Because you can't do it unless you're actually, doing it, in your mind. And it kind of doesn't matter, like, your physical, attributes. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of that, which brings me back to this idea of mindset. If we're going to play the chess match and we're going to sit at the board, if you're thinking to yourself, I could never figure this out and I'm never going to win.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much strategy I teach you or skills or tactics or secrets. If you don't believe you can do it, there's no point. So you have to sit at the board and believe that you can do it. And you believe that you can do it, and you saw this great equalizer of, well, we're all going to be the same height when we sit there. So if I can solve problems better and I can communicate and I can manage a room and manage all the various personalities, because there are so many things that an editor has to be great at beyond the timeline. I think that's one of the fallacies. And it's the most common thing you're going to talk about, like how did you organize your sequences and how do you watch your dailies? All of that's great, but I believe that being amazing in the timeline or amazing in your NLE is the minority of the skills you need to be really good at to be a successful editor. So what do you think some of those additional soft skills are that you bring to the table? And I know that you're probably like, I have a hard time talking about these things about myself, so I'm going to rephrase it. If I'm talking to one of your closest colleagues, and I ask them, what are the soft skills that Michelle brings to the table that would make her a great asset to my team? How would they answer that question?
Well, I think first and foremost, you need to understand how to talk about the story, about the problem at hand. So in terms of, I feel like because I know how to verbalize what might be right or wrong about whatever we're doing, and have a conversation that isn't, laced with other desires or fears. People feel comfortable with having that conversation with me, and we can actually, and I think that they feel, well, this is what I'm hoping, but I think that they feel like they're free to talk about what they actually want out of what we're trying to do, and that I understand what their goals are. Because we're focused on the story, and maybe something I've said clicks with them or leads them to understand that I understand them. So it's really like being able to talk to whoever I'm working with and understanding where they're coming from. So there's that. And I also think that I'm fairly good at reading the room. You know, I mean, that's important for anybody to know. It's like, you know, when you're going to overstep, you know, when to shut up, you know, when to leave the room if you need to leave the room. And you know how to be supportive, even if, you know, that's, I guess the better way of putting it is, you know, when to give tough love and you know, when you have to be supportive. And I think that what people, well, I'm sort of like this because it's hard for me to BS. You know, I don't do that. I think it takes a lot of energy, and, you know, I it's just easier if I'm just honest. And I tend to be honest, and sometimes that hurts some people's feelings, but what can I say? Sorry. But that's just my personality. But I think that works in an editing room because, you know, I see the time that we spend there as a director's last chance to try to make the thing that they initially wanted. So if it's not doing that, someone's got to say it. And I hope that if you hired me, that you're okay with me saying that to you. And if not, and I'm still there, then I'm here to support you, you know. But I think people feel it's more the previous than the latter.
I agree with everything, but I want to add a caveat.
Oh.
I think you and I are very similar. I would love to share a wall someday on a series, just like to collaborate and see if all my suspicions are true. But I think you're similar to me, and that you have no problem being brutally honest. Sometimes maybe to the point of fault where you're like, maybe I shouldn't have shared that much about how I feel about the scene. But that only works if you work with people that trust you. That trust is such an important component. And you strike me as somebody that can build that trust early on because you have that level of confidence and you take the time to learn about the story and really understand and communicate what are your visions, what are your desires for the story. Therefore, when you have objections or you say that things don't work, I feel like if that trust is there, the note or the idea behind all of them is, I'm just trying to protect this. So would you agree that that's also your approach?
I mean, I think to an extent, yes. Like once you have that trust, it's a lot easier for me to be that way. But sometimes you got to be that way out of the gate. Like I've found in recent years that me being that way out of the gate and conveying that I'm not afraid of you rejecting my idea, you know, and I'm not going to be hurt if you decide this isn't going to work out or you think I'm wrong. It's like the lack of fear of being disappointed is not a part of this. I think people respect that. And then they really feel like you're whatever you're saying must be true. And it's not because you want to be liked, and it's not because you want to keep your job. It's because whatever you're talking about is they see it as truth, you know? So, it's hard to know whether you're convinced, because I feel like out of the gate, if you're like that and they're like, okay, that's who she is, then I know that moving forward, when she says something, she's not bullshitting me, because before she didn't bullshit me. You see what I'm saying?
I absolutely see what you're saying. And this goes to another thing that I talk about with my students, which is that in addition to pursuing a project because you're creatively passionate about the theme or the story or the genre or the style, you also have to make sure you're collaborating with people that are the right fit. And I'm guessing there's at least one point in your career where you were just honest out of the gate and there was no bullshit. And that probably didn't work so well. And you realize maybe this isn't such a good fit. I know I've had that experience. And sometimes that's a blessing in disguise, because you don't want to go down the road for 3 months, 6 months, a year with people that see you as an operator.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, I think Yeah, the more I think about it, I think it happened early on in my career. I want to say that I probably have been lucky, or maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's because I'm this way. It's like I'm naturally going to go with this group versus that group, because they're not going to like me in an interview, or they're not going to really dig me in the beginning. Like, I don't think I've ever been like, go for that, but I don't think I've ever been chosen,
And that to me is not luck. If you've
Right.
listened to any of my past shows, and my regular listeners know that I call luck a 4-letter word, because
Right.
luck is a cop out. If you walk
Sure.
across the
Okay.
street and you get hit by a bus, that's bad luck. It just is what it is. But
Sure.
I think the fact that you have avoided the pitfalls of working on projects that aren't a good fit is because you just wake up every morning and you say, this is me. I'm authentic. I'm
Right.
confident in who I am. And guess what? A lot of people don't like that.
Right.
And they're going to say, I don't think Michelle's a good fit for us. But that's because
Right.
you're putting out the authentic version of you, and like attracts like. So I don't
Right.
think it's as lucky as you
Absolutely.
might think, right?
Yeah,
And this brings
sure.
me to another idea that I want to get into that's more about the chess mindset versus checkers, which is that when you're playing a game of chess, and the ironic thing is here, and I think you would agree with me, I actually know very little about the game of chess. And I know that you've talked about how you're like, I don't really understand chess either, shh, right? But when it comes to the theory and idea and strategy of chess, I love it. And it's this idea that you have to make a lot of sacrifices along the way. And I think that the most important word, or important words that you have to focus on in navigating your career path, are yes and no. Yes can be a really
Absolutely.
dangerous word, and no can be a very liberating word. So in your journey, can you think of more than one instance where the word no actually got you to where you are now?
Oh boy, dear. I mean, the word no has been a practice that I've had to get used to in recent years. So it's sort of relatively new for me, I want to say. I want to say it's been new since, we gotta think about this now. It's been new. Boy, when I think about it, what was maybe it was Godless. Maybe it was prior to that. I don't remember, but I know it's the last 2 or 3, 4 years where I know, the body of work is now speaking for itself. I have enough history with a number of people that, jobs, if jobs are available, I'm going to be offered some, or at least knowing that they're there for me to try to go for. And saying no has been the hardest thing, because there are a lot of great projects out there, and it's great when they want you, but you constantly have to think about, what is the long-term goal? How do you want to spend your time, over the next year? Because really, we're really committing a lot. You're committing your time, but you're also committing your brain energy. You're living in that world, whatever world you decide, the story you're going to tell. So that's important too. And career-wise, is what I'm doing here, not that you really know where the thing is going to lead you, because we never really know. But what can you get out of that time, either educational or whatever, relationships. And there's just so many variables. And I have to say, yeah, saying no, there's been a number of times where I've said no, I've pissed people off, and I'm getting better at not pissing people off because I just say no earlier, or I don't get to the word no because somebody else says it before me, before we even go down the path. Love my agent. Thank you, Brady. So, you know what I mean? So I'm getting better at arriving. And the only way you know that no is if you know where you want to go. You can't, if you know what the goal is, it's so much easier to be like, no, that's not that, not that, not that. And all of a sudden, when you've emptied your cup, you can fill it up again with the things that you actually want. Because the thing is if you keep entertaining these ideas of projects that, doesn't really, fit what your ultimate goal is, or to you, like, may not be what you want to do that, right now. Maybe you just want to do something completely different. And yet they might be very good projects and very valuable and worthwhile, but because you're hanging on to them, you're not able to open yourself up to something new that might be better for you.
And that to me is the key. I think that you nailed it there. Is by saying yes to everything, you're actually saying no to potentially better opportunities down the road.
Oh yeah, it's always
because you're afraid, right? You're just afraid that maybe that might not come. And I want to play the devil's advocate for a second, because I know there's at least somebody listening that's a little bit younger, earlier in their career, and they're saying, "Give me a break." Michelle Tesoro and Zack Arnold, who've edited Queen's Gambit and Cobra Kai and all these shows, of course, they can say no, but I'm just starting my career. I've been saying no since I was in high school. The reason I am where I am is because of a very specific string of no's. And I bet that even though you've only honed the skill in the last few years, you are better at it early in your career than you might have thought.
I think I know I was better at it before, but now the no's are a little harder. They're a little bit more complicated. It's kind of like when you get to like level 6 of Double Dragon or whatever, so like, because the beginning no's, I was very clear because, well, it starts with saying I'm better at editing than this other stuff. Deciding I'm going to take this track. I know I'm not good at this, even though that seems interesting. I'm going to put all my efforts here. I remember when I moved out to Los Angeles, I had a lot of friends who are working in reality and documentary, and they were making, well, one friend was very successful at it. And she was really cutting a lot, and making really good money. And when I came out here, I knew from the reason why I was leaving New York is like I couldn't get into editing anything. So I had talked to, some editors that I met at school and some other editors who happened to be ACE members who were alum of our school. And they, the first thing that they would say to me is, okay, you got to get into the union. You have to be an assistant editor. So they drilled that into me. And when I looked at that, I was like, yeah, okay. So when I came out, I knew that I had to at least do that track, because everybody who, we had this editing class in NYU where the teacher, she was in her 90s, Laura Hayes. So she almost knew all the alum would come back and talk about their career. And we met editors, we met assistant editors, people who worked in doc, people who worked in features, all different kinds of people. And it really seemed that there was a track, and I knew I had to do that. So when I came out to LA, I was like, okay, I got to do this. And I remember for like a couple of years, I was being an assistant, and my friend is a documentary editor, all due respect to her, was like, I don't know why you're doing that. Don't you, you're not doing anything creative. Don't you want to be creative? Don't you want to edit? I was like, well, yeah, but I'm not going to do it doing that. That's going to be hard to jump that ladder once we go up. I'd rather start now because I'm 20, whatever, I forgot, 26 or something like that. It's easier for people to swallow 26-year-old trying to be an assistant editor. I'm not going to discover it later when I'm 30 something and I want to jump. And then I don't know what my obligations are going to be at that time, So I knew I was free and I was starting over anyway. And I think that was the first real no,
and that's a scary one, because you were probably turning down jobs that maybe could have paid more money or would have been easier at the time, but you knew it didn't fit with your long-term goals. And that's something I talk about incessantly with my students. You have to be clear on the goal. And I think one of the fears is, well, I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. And I always tell them, you don't have to know for the rest of your life, but you need to be confident about what comes next. Otherwise, you have no way to discern if this is a yes or a no. And then instead of you having a plan, you just become a part of somebody else's plan. And
Right.
that's not the life that I want to lead. I feel like we've got very limited time and I want to get the most out of it. And that means you have to get good at saying the word no. And it requires both the mindset of I'm confident I'm going in the right direction, even if it might not feel like it, but also I'm willing to make a few sacrifices or a few pawns, if you will, going back to our chess analogy.
Yes.
But that having been said, another thing that you've talked about is that you have to be prepared, whether it's financially prepared. I know that you've talked about this in some past articles, but you have this idea that beyond financial capital, it's something that you called having your own human capital. I've never heard that term before. Explain to me what that means.
You were pulling from the archives, Zach Arnold.
I told you I did my research.
You are a student and a scholar. I think that, so in terms of your human capital, I mean, it's a little like sweat equity, right? I think when you're younger and well, I shouldn't say that because there are a lot of older people that have way more energy than I do. But if you have the energy and the drive, like I think, early on when you're just trying to make inroads and you're honing your craft, like you really got to be working on this because as you said earlier, the job is a lot about how you're in the room, politicking in the room, like how do you manage a room, but you have to have the craft down like you don't think about it, and in order to get to that point, you have to put, your Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours in, right? You have to get to that point where whatever you're doing, that's your art and you don't have to think about it. And I think a lot of people too, in the beginning I was noticing, some people just didn't want to give up their weekend, or they didn't want to stay late or they didn't want to come in earlier. They'd rather go and do this or that. And not saying that that's wrong, because I think, you do get to a point where you're like, all right, I need my weekend. And that's a good thing. But I think in the beginning, when you're trying to get to a place where the thing is running on its own, you have to build the product, so, and the product has to be good. So I think I'm trying to remember in what context I had said that, but that's the way that I think about it now. It's just like, well, you can put a lot of you into it. And I think people do see that, do you remember what was that article from? Do you remember?
I didn't actually write down the specific reference. I read through quite a few older articles and interviews, and I don't remember which one I pulled it from. But I think the important thing to really pull out of this is a realization that a lot of creative professionals don't have until later in their career, which is that you are a business. You are the CEO of your own business. And I think that so few people realize that because we feel more like we're a tradesman or a craftsman. But nowadays, you are your own business. And you've used terms like sweat equity and capital. These are all words that they use in business and entrepreneurship. And you have to, like you said, hone those skills and hone those abilities, which brings me back full circle to the very first thing I said in your introduction, which is you have the esteemed credit of having not gotten the internship for ACE. However, very early in your career, you found tremendous opportunity in that. And I think people need to understand that mindset and that viewpoint. So even though you didn't get it, talk to me how you got something out of a non-opportunity.
Well, what's really cool? I don't know what they do now. It may be the same. Is you can apply for, or at the time that I did, which was in 2004, you could apply for the internship. And if you didn't get it, which they basically only could offer it to 2 people. So it's high chances you're not going to get it. Is you can participate in a week-long workshop that they hold where you can meet assistant editors, you can meet editors, you can meet the people who are organizing the internship, and they kind of give you a little bit of a workshop of what it's like to be an editor, what it's like to be an assistant editor. I found it very practical knowledge that they were imparting. And I went there. This is when I first decided to move to Los Angeles. And so I didn't know anybody. And so it was very exciting because there's all these people doing the thing that I wanted to do, and you could talk to them. And then there's people there who were like you, who, you know, came from wherever they came from. And I sat next to a young man, Patrick, I forgot his last name now, very bad with names, who was really nice. And he also did not get the internship, but he was there as well, taking notes. And at the time, I think my headset is going to go out. I'll start over. Patrick at the time was going to assist Lori Jane Coleman on the pilot she was about to do, which was literally like the next month. It was in March. And so we became friends and whatnot. And then he emailed me saying, hey, you know, they're looking for a PA, and, you know, they're trying to staff the post crew. You know, are you interested? I was like, oh yeah, you know. And so I gave him my resume, gave it to Carrie Young, who was the AP on the show. And I met with her, and, you know, she gave me the job, but I don't know how I finagled it, but I didn't get the PA job. I got the coordinator job, which I'm like, okay, what's that? All right, whatever. Don't worry, I'll tell you what to do, Carrie. Really cool lady. So we worked, and I swear to God, I didn't hate the job, but it was like perfect for someone who had no knowledge of the industry, because I could just literally be like a fly on the wall and watch all this stuff happen, and, you know, see how the editor and the assistant editor work together, or see how all the producers come in, and you know, it was a lot of being on the phone, and I hate being on the phone. And Carrie used to do this thing to me where I was on the phone with someone, she would come up to me and start talking to me, and it would literally cancel each other out. And she would do that just to screw around with me. So, but, which is fun, but, you know, it was really great because I got to know them. And actually the person I was talking to all the time was Bruce Sansamir at ABC, who was the post exec. And, you know, because I knew I had helped Patrick. Patrick was having a hard time because he was also new at the time. So sometimes I would go help him with things, figure things out in the Avid, and they took note of that. So, you know, I mean, just because I kind of knew and I wanted to help, and, you know, I wasn't trying to steal his job or anything, you know, certainly not. But like the AP recognized it, and Bruce Sansamir recognized it. And so I was able to get an assistant editor job through that on another project. So, so to me, that was like awesome.
And again, I don't believe any of that was luck. As somebody who says, I don't want to be on set, I don't like to be around a lot of people, you still went to the event. You met people, you introduced yourself, you built relationships, and you took a job that really wasn't well suited for you, but it put you in the position to see the whole playing field and watch all the players in their different positions and say, you know what, I think I get how the game is played now. Now I can go to work, and you were like, I now know which rung of the ladder I want to grab onto. I'm going to grab the bottom rung, and then I can climb it to the top. And here you are at the, what I would call maybe not the very tippy top of the ladder, but boy, are you close. You're. I mean, I don't know what the ultimate top of the ladder is for you, but you're doing pretty well on it so far.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you talk about that because it's, you know, there's varying degrees of what people define as their success, right? And I think that, you know, I don't know what my tippy top was. Maybe it was editing like amazing Academy Award winning movies or whatever, and maybe that still is, but it sort of evened out, kind of dived down in the last couple of years, only because I realized sometimes you don't have control over certain events, and certain projects that come to you, and also sometimes the sacrifices that people have made who are in those positions, you may not want to make that in your life. So, when you define success, it's like, well, is it a career that I guess for me, I was just thinking, I'm pretty happy with the content that I'm able to edit, and I like the people I work with. I've now realized that is really important. I don't want to work with anymore. And I also want to have a happy home life. I want to have these other things, and I want to be healthy. So what is that balance? And I think you have to say, well, since I don't have control over what that tippy top actually is, and maybe I just need to recognize this as being what I should be grateful for, and feel like this is the tippy top, and then I don't have to worry about getting to the tippy top, because what is that going to get me anyway? I think this happened to me because a friend of mine passed away in 2014, a really close friend, and it was in the middle of, I just was trying to remember all the times that I didn't spend with him. And I realized that, well, it was because I was working my off, and I was really in the middle of it. And not that he would say, oh, you should have done this or that. But you do recognize that, not just your time on this earth is limited, but other people's, and your time with them. So, is it worth the tippy top if you never see these people who, if they go, you're going to regret that?
You would think that I had given you a word for word script of this podcast interview, because that is what I call the perfect segue. And the reason that I consider this the perfect segue is that the real heart of this conversation is the life in addition to the job. There is no doubt in my mind, and you and I haven't talked about this at all yet, but given the body of work that you've worked on, and especially given you've done more than one series where it's very unusual, where you're the only editor, that you've probably had to put in some really, really long hours. And you've talked about some of the possible regrets that you've had of maybe working too much and realizing that maybe this is the top of the ladder for me. Maybe I don't want to get to the top, tippy top, and win the Oscar because of the sacrifices that are going to come along the way. And this is going to bring me to telling kind of an embarrassing story that you've never heard before. But I don't remember exactly when it was. I think you alluded to it was maybe in 2019. I was either in the middle of finishing up House of Cards, or I had just seen On the Basis of Sex. I'm not sure which one it was, but I was very well aware of you and had done some research on you. And then I happened to look at my email list one day, and I'm like, oh my God, Michelle Tesoro reads my newsletter. Like, it was just like, I blushed, and I was like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. It was like I had been passed a note in study hall that you liked me. I was like, oh my God. So what I want to talk about is why. Why did you subscribe to my newsletter, and what brought you to me? Because there was a very specific episode and story that resonated with you.
Yes. I think there was a newsletter that came before that specific story, which we'll get to, about how you can, I think it was about focus. You had something about focus, and, how you can, I kind of just jived with some of the things that were on your blog, like, deep work, and kind of doing your work and trying to maximize your day and your time, and like physically taking care of yourself, and then I think I just sort of started listening to the podcast, and I can't remember. I think the Roger Barton one. Yeah, that one was the first one that I listened to. So, and, I didn't know what it was going to be about, really. But, because I was in New York at the time, I was doing a lot of podcasting, and I had gotten an apartment in Chelsea. So I had about a mile, or no, it was a 4 mile, maybe it was 2 mile, 2.5 mile walk, which was about an hour. Perfect for podcasts. So, and I was listening to it, and he was, talking about his life and talking about, all the hours and the hours away from his family and all this stuff. And, of course, he talked about how he was able to use this other, well, it was the thing about Evercast, right? So he talked about Evercast, and I was like, oh, maybe if I can get Scott to, let's see what this is. Because, here I am in New York, because we're doing post in New York, because Scott lives in New York, but production is actually in Berlin. And they've been in Berlin for weeks now. And geez, I left home and I'm in New York, and why am I here? I'm making great money, obviously, it's a distant hire. It's like I was just banking all that money we're trying to save. In my mind, I actually knew, because I had done this with him before, that I knew that my tank was going to be empty, and I wanted to take the fourth quarter off. So I was banking everything that I could so that I could force myself not to take a project. So, and then I saw this, and I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe he'd be interested in working this way, and maybe I could buy some time where I could stay home, or I could stay home and work and not have to move, for so long. Because, on Godless, I did 13 months in New York, and Queen's Gambit, it was a little less than a year. And we did it. And of course, Scott actually fell in love with this idea of doing it, because of course he had his own thing. Oh, do you think I could do this from Connecticut? Can I do this from Martha's Vineyard? And like, and don't get me wrong, we love each other's company for sure. But all of a sudden, our worlds opened up to, we can kind of feed our, introverted selves that doesn't really like going places, and, but still do the thing that, we want to do. So, but yeah, I think I just got to that point where I'm like, I need balance, because, I was engaged, I was still trying to sort of learn how to balance having somebody else in my life. And I no longer could really make decisions without, talking to somebody else, because it affects him now. So, and actually, in fact, having this ability to just say, yeah, I'll go to New York for a year. I don't, nothing's going on for me here. I'll go there and I'll do Godless. I can't really do that anymore. Although, because Brandon also works on location, it's a little easier to do it, because you do it too. So, we've made it work. But yeah, I mean, it started to sort of, get to me a little bit. Although I really enjoy working with Scott, so it's not that hard of a sacrifice.
But at the same time, though, what everybody sees are the pictures of you in the articles and on Cinema Editor magazine, and Queen's Gambit is everywhere. Oh my God, I so want that. I so want that. But right. Nobody really hears about the year-long relocation, city that you don't really need to be in. And what I really want to hone in on is this idea that I know at the end of this, my tank is going to be empty. What right. gets you to that point where at the end of a project like that, there is nothing left in the gas tank?
I mean, how does it happen, or is it more? What do you mean?
Well, what are the factors for you that you think lead to it? Because for some, they can't even get to the finish line. For others, they'll just push and push and push and push and push and get to the end, and it's super long hours, crazy long creative sessions. But then for others, it's a lot more of a paced out marathon than it is a constant sprint. And I think you had mentioned something, I don't remember which interview that it was, but it's similar to something that I've always said is a trap we fall into. It's this mindset of, oh, you know what? I'm going to get healthy again when the next hiatus comes.
Yes. Well, yeah, and unfortunately that happens. It's like that's when people decide they're going to see their family and see their friends, and you kind of go underwater for the period of time that you're on a show. Yeah, I just think, I mean, even by the time I got on Queen's Gambit, I already felt like I wasn't that I was running on fumes, in fact, because I hadn't really taken a break prior to that. And what scared me about it was I knew what it was going to ask of me because I had done it before with him, so, um, but I think the thing is when I'm on that, when I'm working with Scott, it's a little different because I have, especially when it's just me, I have a little bit more creative control. He allows me to manage my own time. I'm not managed. I hate being managed.
Here, here. By the way,
Yes.
like you want to irritate me, try and manage my time. No, thank you.
Don't tell me when to do this and when to. I know exactly what we all need to do, and I'm, he understands me in that, he knows that I'm. Well, he called me. I'm a born department head, is what he said about me. So I mean, so there's that freedom that now there's not, even though it seems like it's more work, it's less stress because I'm allowed to be who I am, in many different ways. And also, so it feels less stressful. And plus I enjoy everything that he writes. I enjoy working with him and projects that we do together. So then that's another level where it's a little bit better. So I can do the long run, but I kind of just knew from being away from home was going to take a toll on me. Being away from, Brandon, was going to always takes a toll. Although we seem to manage, we do every month we try to see each other, or travel to see each other, I should say. But I also just think physically, like it's also, you hold all the stress in, so you're ultimately going to do that. But, yeah, I think mentally I just knew I was going to, it was going to be hard for me because I had already not taken a lot of time off, because before that I did Ballers. Prior to that, I did When They See Us. And then prior to that, I think I took like 2 months or 3 months, and then I was doing On the Basis of Sex. And for some reason, I felt like I hadn't taken the time. I don't know what it is. This is something I'm still trying to figure out, actually, because I always feel tired. And my best friend Sarah said the same thing. We were talking about, I just caught up with her. She's not in the business at all, and I think I had mentioned to her months ago, yeah, I really want to take a break. And I was telling her about whatever next project I'm doing, and she goes, "Oh, so you're really not taking a break, are you?" I'm like, she really knows. I mean, and I don't know what it is. I just think, again, it's the no thing.
It all comes back to that. No. That's right. So let me ask you this. What I'd love to do is dig a little bit deeper. Probably no surprise there. But what I'm really interested in is if there were one area, looking at the way that you manage your day, your week, your habits, if we could get you out of the mindset of, oh, I'm going to take care of all that when the next hiatus comes. But as soon as the hiatus comes, I say yes to the next thing and I fill the space and there's no longer any hiatus. Right. I'm going to do something that's called putting somebody on the hot seat. You ever heard of that concept before?
Oh gosh, yes.
Yes. So I've been releasing some of these sessions. I call it Hot Seat Fridays, to give people a glimpse into the process of when a student comes and they say, I've got this thing that I can't figure out. And as soon as you said, I can't put my finger on what it is, I'm like, ooh, this could be a good opportunity to figure this out. Given how talented you are and how in demand you are, what are the odds that the time is going to come when you have a long gap of several months where you get to recover, focus on your health, and nobody's going to bring a project to you that's almost impossible to say no to? What are the odds of that?
They're very, very, well, they're either high or low. the odds of somebody bringing a project to me and I'm on, say, a sabbatical, they're always high, because every time I try to take a break, it's hard to.
Yes. And so my point is the odds are extremely low that you're going to have a several month hiatus where you don't get an amazing offer that you have to say yes to.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
So that the chances of that are slim because you're really, really good at what you do. And you're now in high demand. And especially after the Queen's Gambit, I would imagine you get offers probably, if not on a daily, at least a weekly basis. Oh, we've got to have the Queen's Gambit editor. We're doing another show about chess. Got to have the Queen's Gambit editor. I would imagine that you have a lot of people reaching out to see if you're available. So if we're talking about chess rather than checkers, let's say that we want to play chess with the way that you manage your lifestyle as a very highly successful in-demand editor. We have to start with mindset. And if the mindset is, I'll figure this out and I'll start to see the family and the friends in the next hiatus that realistically is probably not going to come for you for a long time. If we look at the way that you're pacing out your time and your energy now, what are a couple of things off the top of your mind that kind of come to you like, oh, this is an area that I struggle with?
In terms of pacing out my time?
In terms of anything, if we're talking about any major repeated behavior or habit that's leading to this pattern of I finished the project and my tank is on empty and I need the recovery time that I never give myself. What components might lead to that? And you don't need to get super personal, but at the same time, I have a feeling you're not the only person that deals with these struggles, especially at the level that you're at right now.
Right. I mean, well, I think of course it's the saying no. It's maybe it's being afraid. It's like the FOMO thing, fear of missing out on something cool, fear of never getting that call again. I think we all feel that way because it's, I've seen it happen to people and it makes me feel like I have to maybe think that the Queen's Gambit or such has never happened, because the light goes out like that. So there is a little bit of fear about that. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's sort of the taking care of myself, I guess.
All right. So now we're getting somewhere where because there's this FOMO, and I think it's really important for people to hear somebody at your level that still has the mindset, I might never get another phone call again. I am never going to work in this town and nobody wants to work with me. Because if somebody that's a lot lower on the ladder or a lot younger, they're going to think, well, that's absurd. I feel that way, but there's no way that somebody like Michelle could feel that way. And guess what? We all have that fear. This is going to be the last show and then that's it. They're all going to find out I'm a fraud and I have no idea what I'm actually doing. I just pretend to know how to do this stuff and they're going to figure me out. So if we know that you're going to have a lot of amazing opportunities that are going to come up, some of them might be once in a generation or once in a career chance, right? I think a lot of the shows you've done are really, really great shows, but the Queen's Gambit is something really special and unique, and there's not a lot of those. Had you said no to that for the sake of exercising or seeing more friends or family, I'm assuming you would agree you would look back and see the finished product and say, how could I have said no to that? Like, I can't believe I did that and I missed this opportunity, because what a unique career opportunity. Agreed?
Sure. Hindsight's always 20/20.
Hindsight's always 20/20. So if we know that at least right now that the odds of having a long hiatus and overcoming the FOMO of missing a really great opportunity is slim, then you alluded to, well, maybe it's some of the lifestyle choices or lifestyle struggles of working on these big shows over a long period of time. So getting a little bit deeper into those, what are one or two of the lifestyle struggles off the top of your head that you think are leading to this empty tank by the end of the show?
I mean, I think that you kind of can't get around the amount of time you need, to get through the day-to-days of it, like the dailies, doing the cut, satisfying whatever puzzle solving problem you have in your head, and you got to work through it. And when you're done, and that's not done in an hour. That's done when you're done. So I think there's a mode during when I'm doing this, if I'm not keeping up. It's a little bit easier when I'm doing dailies, which I think I was better at this last time around, in terms of a healthy diet, sleep, doing the yoga routine. And then at some point when things are a little bit more crazy, those things start to fall by the wayside, So if I don't have all the things, I used to call them my ists, the chiropractor, therapist, acupuncturist, massage therapist, that basically fix the broken body over the weekend in order to restore for the coming week. It gets hard. And I think I was trying to figure out a way, because I wasn't home getting those things that I know were at home, like how do I get them where I am? So you kind of have to take these I think it's always like a process for me to figure out how I'm going to restore during a project, constantly restoring. So that is something that I struggle with. I don't know what else.
Well, I think you've hit upon one that's important.
Yeah.
And I'm going to argue, maybe not the opposite point, but I'm going to maybe give you a slightly different perspective. Given the breadth of your 20 plus year career, knowing your work ethic, is there a world in which you believe realistically you can work harder than you already do?
I don't think I could do that.
I don't think that you could either. From what I'm hearing, I don't think you could work harder so you could just get more done and power through.
Right.
But what if, instead of thinking, well, it just takes as much time as it takes to get the job done. That's really what kills me, is that I got to get through the dailies. I got to cut the scenes. I got to think of the ideas, and it just takes as long as it takes. Sure. That's the way that I used to work as well. Essentially, I was editing 24/7. I'm sure you've had the same scenario where you're in your sleep and you're editing in your sleep.
Absolutely.
You're putting the scenes together. You see the timeline. It's just you're playing Tetris all night long in your sleep. So your brain never shuts off. But what if you were to compress the time that you're allowed to be in that mindset where you're burning all of that creative energy? One of the biggest revelations that I had that really started this whole movement of me learning how to work smarter, not harder, is that our brain is roughly 3% of our body weight, but it consumes 20% of our calories. And I was like, that's why I feel like I get hit by a Mack truck at the end of the day. Because one of the things that everybody says is, I don't understand why I feel like this. I just sit all day long. It's not like I'm doing anything. But it's because our brains are constantly going. And the big change for me was when I realized that if I actually allow myself less time and I give myself limits, I get more done in that time. And the big thing for me was realizing that if I can become a master of this tool, just like I am with Avid, this would change the game. And that tool was my calendar. Once I learned how to better manage my calendar and compress the amount of time I allowed myself to be creative, there were less distractions, there were less random breaks, there was less procrastination. But I also found that I can pace myself more like a marathon runner. So give me a picture of a general day for you. Is it a 10-hour day, a 12-hour day, a 16-hour day? Is it in front of the computer the whole time? Are there breaks? Like, what's a day in the life of Michelle while she's editing one of these huge tentpole TV shows or movies?
I mean, I think it's usually a 10 to 12, depending upon how much came in. And generally how I like to structure the day when I'm in dailies, let's just say, for example, is I like to do, and I guess this goes for when I'm out of dailies too. So I like to do the more complicated cutting in the morning when I'm fresh. And then I generally do my selects and watch dailies in the afternoon after lunch. So I know that my blood sugar is probably less, and I'm probably a little tired after the morning. So, you know, I generally get up, and if I'm in New York, I'm doing the walk. So to me, like that's, I get a little exercise. I get there, um, and I get right into whatever the hardest thing, or whatever I think is the hardest thing, and do it first thing. And then I get into the more kind of watching dailies a little later. And then maybe after that, I may get into trying to cut something for the first time, or doing some easier things, because by the end of the day, I'm tired, right? And then go home. So, and then I totally veg out in front of passive TV, like 90 Day Fiance or something. I don't think for HGTV.
You do something similar to me, which is I call them my palate cleansers. I need to watch something that's the polar opposite of what I'm working on. So if I'm working on a comedy, action, drama, I need to watch the polar opposite, and I'll change and choose whatever that show is to be as different. Pacing, music, character, performance, it's got to be completely different from whatever I'm working on at the time, just to cleanse the palate. But let's think about, between all the time that you're working and the time that you're vegging out in front of the TV, how much are you passively or actively looking at a screen in your waking hours?
Oh gosh, almost all of them.
Pretty much every minute that you are awake and conscious, you're staring at a screen.
Yes.
During that time,
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of them in front of me now.
As any good editor would, right? I've got 4 here as well. I'm right there with you. If we look at the pattern that you have throughout the day, from the moment that you finish your walk, you plopped yourself in front of the computer and you said, what's the hardest thing I have to work on? I'm going to do it while I'm fresh. From that moment until you leave the cutting room and then you go back to being in front of another screen, how much of that time is spent away from the computer?
Including breaks where I go and I chat up the assistant or my post supervisor or somebody. Well, I got the 2 hours of the walking, right, before getting there and coming back. Showering, that's important. I don't know, really, maybe about 3 to 4 hours.
So that's not too bad.
Not looking.
But if we're looking at the time you sit down to start doing the editing to the time you leave the edit suite, are you one that just gets into it for hours at a time and the world disappears and you don't talk to anybody, and I forget that I have colleagues and I forget to eat lunch and I don't go to the bathroom and I don't drink water? Or are you getting up and moving around?
I'm getting up and moving around. We have a very leisurely lunch. On the Queen's Gambit, what was fun about it is, I mean, the assistants were awesome. So like, when I had 2 of them. So when they did the dailies prep was already done. So basically we could have lunch, and then after lunch, we would watch the daily sequences together. So that it was social. So it wasn't me by myself. And I didn't have to sit in my chair, because at the time I was in this big room and I bought a projector. So I would sit in one of the other chairs in the room. Like we had like armchairs, 2 armchairs and a couch were in there. So I would sit in one of the armchairs, so not at the desk, and I would just look at the projector while one of the assistants was marking selects on the Avid. So it gave me a different perspective. So that was a little bit more fun, but yeah, I mean, then I'm sure there was maybe twice during the day where I would go in and talk to Mick and chat him up and talk about dogs or whatever we were talking about at the time. And I did that a lot. I would get up, okay, I gotta chat somebody up, go somewhere, yeah. So there is a lot of up and down. And I think, I guess I didn't mention, like, when I get up, before I would go to walk, I would do like yoga in the morning or something. I did have a good practice of 30 minutes of something before I would leave for work.
So you're doing 30 minutes of yoga, 2 hours of walking. You're getting up and moving around all day long. You're taking a leisurely lunch. So it seems to me that can't be what's leading to the empty tank at the end of the show, because those are all the things that I would prescribe and say, you're doing pretty well.
No,
So
I mean,
what else can we
honestly,
tap into? Because that sounds pretty good to me.
yeah, I mean, I really tried to maximize, well, I shouldn't say max, I really tried to pace out my time because, I can't just sit there and do it. And I also know that when I'm not actually actively working, that's when I can solve some problems, like in the shower or, when I wake up and I'm like, oh, there's that thing, I could do this or whatever. So, I don't want to be working all the time, but
And I love that you
um,
point that out, by the way, because so many people with our culture fear that if I'm
mhm,
not at my computer, I'm not earning
I
my
know.
paycheck. And I had this conversation with Kevin Tent recently, who's now the
Ah,
newly anointed president of ACE. And he talked
right.
about how he gets his best ideas in the shower or going
Yes.
for a run or riding his bike, right? And he even talks about, oh my God, he takes naps. Like
Yes.
the horror, how dare you, right? But
Right.
ultimately, we're paid to generate ideas. We're not paid to
Right.
punch a clock. We're paid to generate ideas and solve problems. And I
Right.
find the less I'm in front of my computer, the better I am at solving problems. But when I'm at the computer, I am just getting through that stuff as quickly and effectively as possible.
Right. Right. Um, yeah, I mean, I've thought this, and now I'm going to put myself in a pickle because it'll make it hard for me to say no to certain things. Um, but the idea of a sabbatical is really something I want to do. I don't know if financially I'm prepared to do that right now. Um, because we have certain goals, my husband and I, for this year. But it is something that I think I need to make more important because the thing that it's funny when you do these interviews, like sometimes they ask you, so what shows are you watching? I'm like, who has time to watch other shows? I'm watching this show that I'm working on right now. Like I watch it like 12 hours a day. The last thing I want to do is like watch another show that's like, that's like mine. I mean, we talked about this. We want to cleanse the palate a little bit, but like, I mean, there used to be times where I'd come home and I wouldn't turn on TV at all. It might be sports. That's the other thing I like to watch is tennis or something like that. But yeah, I feel like I've sort of lost the things that maybe were there in the beginning in terms of, like I used to watch like directors stuff. Like I would, watch Sidney Lumet's movies in order, of when he made them or something like that. And I just haven't done that really since film school. Um, so I wish I could do that. I wish I could read a book every 3 days. I'm so jealous of my mother. I keep buying my mother books, and she's 80. She turned 80 in September. She gets through these books like every other day. She's like, all right, I need another book. I'm like, God, I got to get you another one. But it's like I'm kind of jealous of that, because and I know that doing something like that would give me a break from the screen. Would probably be better for my neck. Right now, I don't know if you notice, I'm like doing this a lot because like it's super tight. But you know, I could do something else with my body and my mind, and I could be like kind of filling it up. I think it's more like filling it up with other influences so that when I go back into the trenches, that is, what we do, there's other ideas and they're not informed by TV. And I mean, maybe I love watching movies. So I want to, I think recently I bought one of those tickets to the Sundance Film Festival. And and I loved watching that because there's all these different kinds of films that you're not seeing on Netflix or Amazon or whatever. So it's just sort of different ideas of how people do things, and I want to kind of have that joy again.
All right, now we're really digging in. Well, we've identified, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the reason you feel empty at the end of a project is because you're sitting at the computer for too long of hours and you're
Right.
not taking care of yourself and you never exercise. It seems to me that you have the lifestyle habits of a healthy editor pretty wired. It seems to me that you've just been doing it so consistently for so long that there are a lot of other parts of you that are not being nourished because you're so busy working on the next show. So let me posit a question. Talking about this idea of very specific goals, let me posit this question that you can ask that might help. What if when the next opportunity comes, let's hypothetically assume that you've just begun your next hiatus. You're like 2 weeks into it at the most. You're still kind of, it's what Walter Murch and I called the hiatus flu, where it's like you're seasick like the first week or two. You're like, what is real life like again? Like, ooh, the sun.
Yeah.
Like, we all kind of go through that period of massive decompression. It's really just feels like the flu. So let's assume you're just getting over that and you see all this possibility and bam, the phone rings. And it's another amazing opportunity and you're worried about missing out. There's this FOMO. What if we flip the script? And instead of saying no to the job, you're saying yes to the book reading and catching up on all of the movies and all of the relationships that you're going to rekindle. If you reframe it that way, could you create a goal towards, I'm going to make this sabbatical rock solid. This is going to be surrounded by concrete walls on my calendar, knowing all of the things I get to say yes to at the expense of, quote unquote, another credit or another job.
Right. You know, it's like, I know I need to do this. And yet there's this thing that's like, I've already told this person, I've already met with this person, you know.
But have you committed, signed the dotted line and said, yes, I'm absolutely showing up?
Absolutely not. I have not. I don't even have offers. Well, actually I have signed the dotted line on the immediate thing, but the immediate thing is only really is a 2 monther. So it's not a lot, because that's what I've been doing since Queen's Gambit. I've just been signing on to these little things that are short commitments because I am not ready to commit. So literally since the Queen's Gambit has ended, I have not been able to commit to like a long project at all. It's not what I want to do. So, but there is this, you know, idea, because I even know that Scott wants to do something else next year, this time, April. So, you know, even saying, okay, I'll do this thing that I've already signed on the dotted line, and, you know, even if I do that, and then I don't do anything after that, because I still don't have anything lined up after that. So there's still this opportunity. Like I'm basically giving myself this opportunity to do the thing I actually want to do, but it's like I'm not ready to jump in the water yet.
And that's fine. You don't need to be ready. But are you getting a little bit more clarity around this idea that I think in my gut already knows the answer, because my gut does not want to commit to anything more than 2 months. My gut knows I really need to take a longer break. And it sounds to me, and it seems like it'd be pretty nuts to say no to Scott Frank right now.
Right, sure.
Given everything that's going on, given what just happened with the Queen's Gambit and where he's going next, I wouldn't advise you to say no. I prefer to stay home and read books for the next 9 months. Right, probably not the best career choice. But if you know that's already there and you know that's going to happen and there's a date associated with it, is there a world where you can just rearrange some of your plans, whether it's financially or otherwise, to put yourself in the position where this is the time that you get that true sabbatical?
It's possible. It's possible. I'll have to think about that.
All right, I'm going to throw in one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up, because this has gone massively longer than we thought it would.
Sorry.
But no, don't apologize at all. You're kidding. I'm having so much fun. I could go for another hour. I love this. But I'm going to ask one more question. It's an exercise that I run people through. It's a mental exercise.
Okay.
I want you to imagine that you get to jump in a time machine and you get to meet with yourself on morning one of this next show. So I think you said it was April of next year that you would start this next show with Scott?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's going to be similar situation where it's episodic, bunch of episodes. You're the person.
Actually, we don't know.
Oh, you don't know for sure, but it's going to be probably another one of these totally immersive big projects.
Something.
Right?
Sure.
And I know you probably can't give anything away. I wouldn't expect you to, but just in general, we're going to assume at the very least it's another Queen's Gambit, potentially even bigger in scope and more responsibility. Potentially. Who do you want Michelle to be the first morning she sits in the chair? Because you specifically said, I don't even feel like I was recovered when I started the Queen's Gambit. Is that a pattern you want to repeat, or do you want to show up to this next show on day one saying, oh my God, am I ready to cut again? I am so refreshed and rejuvenated, and I just ingested all this new knowledge from these films and these books and all these experiences that I've had during this sabbatical. I'm going to kick the crap out of this versus, oh God, why did I just take that job? I'm exhausted. I've had like 2 weeks off, and now I got to do this again for another year? Like, which Michelle do you want to be on morning one?
Michelle A.
Knowing that that's what you could be missing out on, is that fear greater than the fear of filling the gap?
This is true. Yeah. That is probably what I need. Ugh. You know, it's hard. I mean, I know it's easy, and if it were just me, maybe it would be different. But well, maybe it can be talked about with the spouse.
I don't know any of the circumstances in your life. I can't see your bank accounts. I'm going to make no judgments about whether or not you should be or you have to be doing this. But I think there's a part of your gut that's saying this might be the time, and maybe I at least need to have a few discussions and do some problem solving, as you do as a storyteller, to see maybe this is the time to make it happen, because it certainly doesn't sound like it's going to happen next year.
That is true. That's true.
So we don't call it the hot seat for nothing.
Oh, Zack, I feel like I've gotten one of those, energy sessions. I forgot what they call it. It's like Reiki. Where they really get into you, and you're like screaming or something. But it's true. It's just one of these things that, deep inside, that's what I think about. And, a lot of people think about these things, because at some point, if you don't choose to do something about it, it will do it for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. At some point, you're going to have a sabbatical. The question is it going to be on your terms? Right.
Exactly.
So on that lighthearted note, I would just like to tell you what an immense pleasure this evening has been for me. I'm going to be brutally honest. I hate doing podcasts at night. Nights are that's my time. I recover. Like, I started my morning at 7:00 this morning, full day of editing. And then I'm like, oh God, I got to get on the microphone with somebody. My God, this is so much fun. I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen. I have so much respect for the work that you do, how you do it, all of the information and knowledge and inspiration that you're putting out into the world, and all the podcasts and the articles and everything else that you're doing. And I really appreciate how brutally honest you were willing to be in our conversation tonight. So I can't thank you enough.
I mean, thank you for making it an experience for me, instead of this thing of, okay, what am I going to say about the show? What am I going to say about this or that? But, this is very important. I mean, I feel like I've had a real conversation about real things,
Well, good. Well, I'm glad that you feel that way. And that was what I promised in the beginning. And I'm glad that I was able to deliver that. My hope is that by the end of a podcast interview, if I don't know somebody personally, I feel like we could be friends by the time we're done talking. I certainly feel that way tonight. So
yes.
When this stupid pandemic is over and we can actually see each other in person at some event again, it will be a pleasure to actually meet like real human beings.
Oh yes, I think definitely. And I'm sure, we'll keep in touch. You have my email.
I do indeed. So before we go, Yes. One last thing for anybody that's been listening to this, and I'm going to assume it's going to be a lot of people. They're going to say, man, Michelle really inspired me. I want to learn more about her. I want to follow her. Maybe I want to connect with her. What's the best way for people to find you? Is it social media? Is it email? Is it LinkedIn? Like, where can people connect with you the best way possible?
I mean, I think I am on the Twitters and I am on Instagram. So they can reach me there or email, actually. Yeah.
So are you okay with us then providing your email address to anybody that reaches out and asks for it?
Sure, that's fine.
Excellent. I promise it's not going to be hordes and hordes and tons of people.
I'm sure it won't.
Because most of them are saying, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to bother her. Could never ask. I'm too scared. But there are a few that are courageous enough that may reach out. So I want to make sure that it's okay to do so.
Yeah, that's okay.
Excellent. So on that note, I want to thank you again so much for being here. This has been a tremendous pleasure, and I cannot wait to share this interview and this conversation with the world.
Great. Thank you, Zack. Thank you so much.